Hello students. In this lecture, let us discuss important prose writers and their contribution to English prose in Romantic age. Though this period is specialized in poetry of Wordsworth, Coleridge and other writers, there also appeared few prose writers who rank very high. There was no revolt of prose writers against 18th century comparable to that of poetry, but a change had taken place in prose style also. Many 18th century writers depended on assumptions about the suitability of various prose styles for the purpose which they shared with their relatively small but sophisticated public. Whereas in Romantic period, the prose writers rather more concerned with subject matter and emotional expression than with appropriate style. They wrote for an ever increasing audience which was less homogeneous in its interest and education than that of their predecessors. There was also an indication of growing distrust of the sharp distinction between matter and manner which was made in 18th century, and of romantic preference for spontaneity rather than formality and contrivance. There was a decline of the grand style and of most forms contrived of architectural prose written for what may be called public or didactic purposes. Though some poets like Coleridge, Shelley, Keats, Byron wrote excellent prose in their critical writings, letters and journals, some of the novelists like Scott and Jane Austen were masters of prose style. Those who wrote prose for its own sake in the form of essays and attained excellence in the art of prose writing were Charles Lamb, William Hazlitt and Thomas de Quincey. Charles Lamb. He is one of the most lovable personalities in English literature. He lived a very humble, honest and most self-sacrificing life. He never married but devoted himself to the care of his sister Mary, 10 years his senior, who was subject to mental fits, in one of which she had fatally wounded her mother. In his Essays of Elia and Last Essays, in which is revealed his own personality, he talks intimately to the readers about himself, his quaint whims and experiences, and the cheerful and heroic struggle which he made against misfortunes. Unlike Wordsworth, who was interested in natural surroundings and shunned society, Lamb, who was born and lived in the midst of London street, was deeply interested in the city crowd, its pleasures and occupations, its endless comedies and tragedies, and in his essays he interpreted with great insight and human sympathy that crowded human life of joys and sorrows. Major works. William Charles Lamb is known for his Tales from Shakespeare, where he narrated the stories of the plays of Shakespeare and made it simple. His other works are blank verse, specimens of English dramatic poets who lived about the time of Shakespeare, Mrs. Leicester's School, and Essays from Elia. The style of Lamb is described as quaint, old, because it has the strangeness which we associated with something old fashioned. One can easily trace in his English language the imitations of 16th and 17th century writers who most loved Milton, Sir Thomas Browne, Fuller, Burton, Isaac Walton, etc. According to the subject he is treating, he makes use of the rhythms and vocabularies of these writers. That is why in every essay Lamb's style changes. This is the secret of the charm of his style, and it also prevents him from ever becoming monotonous or tiresome. His style is also full of surprises because his mood continually varies, creating or suggesting its own style and calling into play some recollection of this or that writer of the older world. He is most lovable of all English essayists, and in his hand, essay reached its perfection. His essays are true to Johnson's definition, a loose sally of the mind. Though his essays are all criticisms and appreciations of the life of his age and literature, they are all intensely personal. They therefore give us an excellent picture of Lamb and of humanity. Though he often starts with some purely personal mood or experience, he gently leads the readers to see life as he saw it, without ever being vain or self-assertive. It is this wonderful combination of personal and universal interest together with his rare old style and quiet humor which have given his essays his perennial charm and earned for him the covetable title of the Prince among English essayists. His popularity extended through the 19th century into 20th but waned after 1934, the centenary of his death. Since the 1960s, however, his reputation has risen again with the publication of new biological and critical works celebrating and analyzing his artistry, which something of cottage industry. The next important prose writer who belonged to Romantic age is William Hazlitt. He was just the opposite of Lamb. He was a man of violent temper with strong likes and dislikes. In his judgment of others, he was always downright and frank and never cared for its effect on them. During the time when England was engaged in a bitter struggle against Napoleon, Hazlitt worshipped him as a hero, and so he became in conflict with the government. His friends left him one by one on account of his aggressive nature, and at the time of his death, only Lamb stood by him. Hazlitt wrote many volumes of essays, which the most effective is The Spirit of the Age. He gives critical portrait of a number of his famous contemporaries. This was a work which only Hazlitt could undertake because he was outspoken and fearless in the expression of his opinion. Though at times he is misled by his prejudice, yet taking his criticism of art and literature as a whole, there is not the least doubt that there is great merit in it. He has the capacity to see the whole of his author most clearly, and he can place him most exactly in relation to other authors. In his interpretative of life, in the general and proper sense, he shows an acute and accurate power of observation and often goes to the very foundation of things. Underneath his light and easy style, there always flows an undercurrent of deep thought and feeling. Some of his important works are Characters of Shakespeare's Plays, The Round Table, a collection of essays on literature, men, and manners. It has 2 volumes. Lectures on English poets, view of English stage, lectures on the English comic writers. These are certain essays where he tried to give the portrait of the characters and writers. Lectures on political essays with sketches of public characters, lectures chiefly on the dramatic literature of Age of Elizabeth, and Table Talk, which is published again in 2 volumes, is a notable work of Hazlitt. The Spirit of Age, notes of a journey through France and Italy, The Plain Speaker, The Life of Napoleon Bonaparte, which is biography, Conversations of James Northcote, a dialogue. These are other works of Hazlitt. The Spirit of the Age, in which he gives critical portraits of a number of famous contemporaries. This was a work which only Hazlitt could undertake. The style of Hazlitt has force, brightness, and individuality. Here and there we find passage of solemn and stately music. It is the reflection of Hazlitt's personality, which is outspoken, straightforward, and frank. As he had read widely and his mind was filled with great store of learning, his writings are interested with sentences and phrases from other writers, and there are also echoes of their style. Above all, it vibrates with the vitality and force of his personality, and so never lapses into dullness. In this section, we can understand the writers Charles Lamb and Hazlitt, and they wrote prose for its own sake in the form of essays and attained excellence in the art of prose writing. These essays often explore their own mental state and emotional conditions, and they are subjective tone which inform many of these essays and non-fictional prose. Even the author is writing so-called objective critical essay. With this, I'll conclude the lecture. Thank you.